Dear Diary, Mood, Triangle Squared, Halloween.
Well, special guest Pete wins.
Hello and welcome to Triangle Squared. I'm your host, Pete Wentz / Brett Beck, or actually Brett Beck, inhabited by the spirit of 2008 Pete Wentz.
That's where I was going to say 2008 Brett Beck.
Also that, I mean, if you knew me, Donovan specifically, who knew that this gag was coming up, this is not too far from what I actually look. What the fuck was that?
We got Ghost in the studio.
Oh man. Okay, this is actually the Halloween episode now. I'm a believer.
I'm pretty sure that's your daughter.
No, I think you hear the behind it. It's a ghost. I definitely heard that. That is incredibly distracting. Hey, Ghost, can you please stop? Okay, there we go. And it's just moaning through the walls. Here we go. Well, anyway, I never wore eyeliner until last night at the Halloween party, and I've learned a lot about eyeliner. It is tough to put on, even tougher to get off.
Never have had that problem.
I'm glad
before.
I never went through this particular phase of guy liner. Everything else is not too far from the truth. So, you know, also I feel like I'm, invoking 2008 Kiki from his MySpace pictures.
Probably so.
So one of our patrons and good friends out there, Kiki, I hope that you feel, kindred spirit within me. Not within me, actually. That's, that too far. But we are Triangle Squared, a PlayStation podcast. And of course, this is our penultimate Halloween episode since Halloween is going to be Thursday. This is the last day of this great set. And we do have a fun thing planned to kind of close off the Halloween season that we'll get into in just a little bit. But if you like what we're doing here or actually, I guess if you just want to listen to the show, or if you stumble across it in one place or the other, if you stumble across it listening to it, you can find us over on video format on YouTube, where you can watch it, see our beautiful set, and terribly, I don't know what the hell word I was just thinking. Terribly terrible costume. Or cringeworthy, whatever you want to say about it. But anyway, you can watch us over on YouTube if you like what we're doing over there and want to chime in with your thoughts on anything. Go down in the comments section below. Let us know your thoughts, whether you liked the show, didn't like the show. Thumbs up if you liked it, thumbs down if you hated it. Subscribe if you liked it and want to see more. If you find us on YouTube and would prefer to listen to us, you can do so. Bam, good luck for you. You have Google Play Music, iTunes, Podbean. Podbean, the app actually lets you comment and interact with us there if you don't want to have to go outside of your means to do so. Maybe you're not a big social media person. If you want to chime in and be part of our community's take question that we do every week, where at the end of every episode we ask a question just to follow it up at the beginning of the next episode and get the community's feedback on that particular question, you can of course do so by going in the comments like we mentioned, or going over to our Twitter at Triangle SQRD, our Facebook group we have, which is Triangle Squared, a PlayStation podcast, or over on our Discord, which we keep linked in the description below, where we have our community's take section. It's a little chat room specifically aimed towards that, where you can go in and give your thoughts on the community's take, as well as a podcast open discussion channel where you can come in and talk about anything that we talk about in the podcast and chat with us about our thoughts more on it, or give your thoughts on it, or just have fun in our general chat with everybody else in the community who is over there. But while we will be getting into a lot of stuff that went down, and we're going to use a little segue, it's partially about Fallout 76 and the mess that it's again found itself in, as well as a slew of games getting delayed and how those things kind of connect to each other. But we're going to start this show off the right way, the way we always do. Saul, what's been up to this week? Have you played anything? Because I've got a weird answer for me for once, but you go on right ahead.
I have stayed on the train of Destiny 2 for the most part, except Friday. No, it was yesterday. Yeah, yesterday I started up Modern Warfare, the full release finally. So today I started up the campaign for it and been enjoying about 3 hours of that, 2 hours. I'd say about 4 hours of that actually today.
So you're saying you've played multiplayer up until today?
Yeah.
And now you played story?
I played multiplayer with Gavin and Eric last night, and we played for a good solid couple hours. And then this morning I decided to start up the campaign of it to see how good it was. Pretty good so far.
Okay, that's good.
Pretty good.
All right, so just Destiny and Call of Duty, huh? First person shootering it up?
Yes, sir.
I legitimately, for the first week since I've had the system that I'm completely aware of, I have not turned my PlayStation 4 on since before we last recorded.
Woo!
the only games at all I played this week, and only game I should say, is specifically Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening, which I can now definitively say, for as fun as it was and as good, I guess I can say, as it was, I do have the definitive answer of I don't think it was worth $60 still.
I can see that.
I still played it, and that's fine. Personally, if I would have bought it, I would have felt like I paid $20 too much for it.
I can see that.
That's about where I stand on it. Doesn't mean anything bad about the game. I still enjoyed the game, and that's honestly the type of Zelda game that I click more with.
Mm-hmm.
Breath of the Wild just didn't do it for me. I tried and tried, and I'm really glad that at least, if nothing else, even if it means that they're going to keep charging $20 more than I feel like, in particular, that one was worth. They could do something different with a new style top-down Zelda that's not constrained by trying to be a remake. Then even if we get a game of similar scope and scale, you do kind of go to that thing of, even if I feel like it's $20 too much, I might actually spend it just because I like that style of Zelda enough to bite the bullet and say, I feel like I'm paying too much, but it's an experience I can only get from them.
Especially from a fresh adventure.
Yes, yeah, and like I say, most of the time, because one of my favorite examples of just a really cheap but great, essentially Zelda game that I always bring up was the Adventure Time: The Nameless Kingdom, and it's surprising to me that game had so much going on with it while being so cheap. And I did get it on sale, but even at launch, it was a $20 or $30,
wasn't it?
Yeah. $1. Yeah. So really, I got a lot of game for $1 on that, and I loved it and got it to platinum. But it just goes to show that that's a style of game that doesn't get touched very often anymore. And since we do not have any more games happening in that Adventure Time style that kind of ape that, and I'm not gonna say ape. That's a little bit. I think take great inspiration and pay great homage to that style with that game. It's a series and a style that does not get touched very often anymore. Very similar to how you don't see very many dungeon crawler, isometric dungeon crawlers anymore. Like Diablo is one of the last of its kind in a lot of ways. But yeah, that's about it for me. I do intend with the Outer Worlds dropping and having Yakuza and having more people talking to me about Yakuza Kiwami and kind of assuring me that even starting on Kiwami, while it may not be the most polished version to start on, that it ultimately doesn't matter. I think I actually am going to try and dip my toes into that. How easy it's going to be to be able to play Yakuza while also playing the Outer Worlds, I'm unsure about.
Yeah, I meant to pick up Outer Worlds today on Game Pass, but I actually decided I'm just going to go ahead and get it for PlayStation 4. One of the things I was worried about is how it would run on the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One. So I was like, I know that for sure I'll be able to run it well on my PC. And it actually turns out there's no problems across any board. At all. So yeah. I'm going to go ahead and just pick it up on PlayStation 4.
Aren't major problems. Again, types of games with these things, I'm not going to say that, a lot of people get on Bethesda for their bugs, and I got to give it to Obsidian at the same time. They were using the same engine as Bethesda at the time, so it's partially on that. But Fallout New Vegas, for as much as I love the game, was still bug-riddled. It's just, do the bugs happen in such severity that it detracts from the game's experience? And from most of what we've seen about the Outer Worlds, even though I've not gotten to play yet either, I'm hoping to go to GameStop after we leave here, since I didn't pre-order it for whatever reason. Being a little more cautious with my pre-ordering.
I understand.
These days. Trying to do that thing where I don't buy a game until I'm going to play it. So I don't pre-order it because I'm like, unless I know that I'm going to put everything aside to play it day one, I'm not going to pre-order it. But, yeah, I've seen across the board that while there's bugs in there and bugs that you'd expect from a game of that style, sometimes people clipping into objects and standing in weird places or floating occasionally.
Yeah.
It's nothing that's going to completely hamper the experience of the game. And that's what I've seen for the most part. So that's good. But anything else you want to throw in there, Saul, before we get moving along?
No, that's it for me.
All right, the community's take question that we always do. Of course, our last episode, if you didn't get a chance to check it out yet, or if you're listening out of order for whatever reason, was about WWE 2K20 and the now that the game is actually released, the severe drop in quality that I think most people would agree that has happened. So our community's take question was simple. If you're a wrestling fan, does the quality drop of WWE 2K20 hamper your interest in the game? If you aren't a fan, would a similar drop in quality deter you from picking up a new entry in a series you love, or do you accept it to get more of what you love? And part of why I like that question is there's a lot of series that come out in either yearly or bi-yearly setups like Call of Duty that I think have a number of different things that pull people to and from them. Sometimes it's something as simple as going, I don't like Call of Duty when it decides to be futuristic and go into space. I'm gonna skip out on Infinite Warfare and Black Ops 3 or whatever, and I don't like the future tech stuff, so they back off of there. Then you get the people who really love the realistic tone at the World War II game set that are not tied into weird sci-fi mess. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I liked both Black Ops 3 and Infinity Warfare, and did not play World War II because it doesn't strike my interest. So that one's one of those things where this is a question that's more aimed at drops in qualities, when there's already, I think, a question that many people have to ask themselves about what do they get from a yearly franchise. Do you get FIFA every year? Or do you get FIFA every other year because you feel like every other year you see a jump from the year before?
Yeah.
You know, that's a weird thing. Across the board, I found out that a lot of our listeners like WWE more than I realized because I'm not in that world. I don't think about it.
Yeah,
so
same here.
I don't, I know that I have a couple of friends that like it, and I know that they're into it. But it was interesting to see how much of our people have that, and then of course hearing from the people who just had different thoughts on series as a whole dropping in quality. So nobody on Facebook answered, which is fine. We got a bunch of answers across both Twitter and Discord. The first one I'm going to go ahead and hit up is the longest one, and I'm going to try and get it across the best way I can. Comes from longtime listener and good friend, Mr. Bobo May, Josh. He says, here's the deal. I've been a wrestling fan for the better part of 20-something years. There's no doubt that there have been periods when I have walked away from the product for a little while, but would always come back. The 2K games are not the greatest game in the universe, but it's still fun to play as your favorite superstars, aka Alexa Bliss. But the problem is that the past couple of years, there have been no improvements to the game. Some graphical, but that's about it. It's sad when the most joy I think people will get out of this newest game is in seeing all the glitch videos, which, quick break there, is absolutely true. Twitter has been riddled with people just mocking and laughing about the game and making the joke of maybe it is worth $60 just to get to see this crap show unfold,
Yeah.
Ryan was definitely one of them, sharing videos and wondering how this game was released with this quality. But anyway, he says, I have no intentions of buying this year's game, and will be the first time in 6 years that I pass. If I get it for review, then so be it. He does do game reviews. If you want to go check that stuff out, he reviews for Demon Gaming, which is a site that we have been sharing and following and whatnot on Twitter. Go check him out over there if you want. He's got some reviews up and done some giveaways and stuff. Go follow him. They're also on Facebook if you want to do that. And he also does reviews for some other sites still, as far as I know. I think Square XO and a couple other sites. But from there, he says, that being said, I have thought long and hard about how people receive the WWE product these days. There are more promotions to support than ever, and AEW is making constant headlines. I think it is fair to say that people will find literally anything and everything to complain about WWE. I truly believe that once the game is patched, it will be fine. Doesn't change the fact that they haven't added anything new and everybody looks like they have Shawn Michaels eyes, but it will be playable. I hope next year they decide to try and change it up. Maybe being an annual game is not a good idea anymore. Anyways, keep up the great works, dudes. Go drink some water and avoid that turkey spaghetti.
I got water right here.
I got
Nope,
flavored water, but it's not. It's just carbonated. It's kind of the difference.
Yeah. Thank you, Josh. But yeah,
thanks, Josh.
I can see pretty much what you mean and through that entire thing, especially being a fan of something and falling in and out with it. Definitely, it happens, especially with like content fatigue. And I do think it's interesting too that sometimes when you fall in and out of something can happen with the brand or the item that you like that discourages you from ever coming back. And I can actually see this could be a thing where maybe you were a fan of the wrestling games way back when, and then you thought, hey, you know what? It's 2020. I might want to check this one out. And you come back to see this game, and you're like, oh, well.
Time to dip out for the foreseeable future.
That was a mistake. But, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there's plenty of times where people they love something, and maybe they just really like it, and they take a step far enough away from it and that happens across the board. It doesn't have to be games; it can be any form of entertainment. I think people do that with podcasts sometimes. It's probably happened to us where somebody was listening to us, fell out, and came back, and we said something ridiculous, and they said, "Well, I'm gonna head out, SpongeBob style. Who knows?"
All right, I'll head out.
But it's something that happens across all entertainment. But I do think that Saul brings up a good point on that in particular. If you come back to such a drop in quality, like let's say the last one that you played was 17, you stopped for a couple of years, said I'm going to come back, and then you come back to this, I would definitely see it either if they were smart, if it's one of those things where if they were smart enough and had the ability at the same time to go in and look it up, they have a higher chance of hopefully not getting their money wasted. But sometimes people just like to go out and casual buy on a whim. I do the same thing. Can't blame anybody for it. It's one of those things where I think that there's probably people who have went out and spent $60 on this completely unaware that it had a chance of being rough.
Yeah.
Just to feel like their money was wasted, or at least the value of their money was somewhat disrespected. Couple more over here. Let's see. Mr. Liam says, the quality has dropped bad, but it's also how the games are handled. If you are not in the know, there are the big names like Stone Cold or Undertaker who may do nothing that year but still be in the game. Meanwhile, people they released / fired aren't there. So if you like people like Adam Rose, AJ Lee, or my boy CM Punk, you're crap out of luck. Family-friendly podcast. Sorry, Liam, I can't quote you verbatim. I also have less interest in them due to the trophies being 10 out of 10 hard online trophies in my career and the new tower challenges. Forget that. Heck no. And then one more from over here on Discord. Mr. LGB always coming in. He says, I tried getting into wrestling games when I was younger, but the controls were a deterrent for me. I completely agree with that. When I played this game on 64 and then I played them again on PS2 with my stepbrother who loved them, the controls are jank. And it makes it really hard to want to even have fun with these somewhat funny things like going and doing crazy wrestling moves. It's one of those games that's kind of like Gang Beast. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Where it's like half of the fun is just seeing how ridiculous something's going to end up. And even if I don't enjoy watching wrestling, being the person who's controlling the character to go pick up a table just to smack somebody over the chair with it where you can crap talk them when they're in the same room, there's a fun to it.
Yeah.
Sports games have a palpable fun that even if you don't like the sport, you can somehow find a thing in it. Me and you were talking about how you like football games and you've played Madden off and on and that you really like them. And when you mentioned that, I said I've played football games and have enjoyed playing them with other people. But you stand on a slightly different side. You just enjoy them in general, even though I don't think that you typically keep up with football in a real fashion.
A semi-fashion.
Just because of family tradition, or
no, just
genuine interest.
Like I know a game's going on right now and kind of around, but I'm not going to watch them, all of them. I don't really know the players' names or anything like that, but I watch them. I'm like, oh, you know what? Alabama versus Arkansas. I'll keep my eye on that because I'm from Arkansas.
Yeah,
but I don't know. I couldn't tell you the quarterback's name of Arkansas.
Fair.
But it's fun to watch it. Just
Fair. All right, well, he says, going on from there, he says, it stopped him from even getting the newer ones. My waning interest in WWE did not help that either. Either way, the same can be said about Fallout 76, which weirdly is going to be in this episode, and how the game really affected my decision about buying the next game in the series whenever that will be produced. And I guess any game that is released in such a state affects a lot of how future games are looked at, which is very much to Saul's point he just got through making. It just shows how much the developer and publisher are willing to treat a series just to have the game out for some cash, which does not paint a good picture for the future of the series. Thank you, LTB. Appreciate that. I agree with a lot of that. A couple more from over here. I want to go with one that's a little less tied into wrestling so we can get the other end of the question for people who aren't quite in the wrestling world or wrestling game world, as it were. Mr. Undead Sweet Jones, our buddy Ryan, he says, I would be heartbroken if Kaz, well, I actually don't know how I think it's Kaz, retired tomorrow. I know who he's talking about. I don't really think about it. I call it Kaz, but I don't actually know how it's pronounced. Retired tomorrow, and GT dropped in quality as a result, GT being Gran Turismo. I'd rather them cancel the series than see one of my favorite franchises fall from grace. I can't think of a series that I love that this has happened to. Then he mentions, Ace Combat kinda, but they bounced back. Which led to an interesting question, too, with this. One of the bits of information that Saul, I'm not sure if you saw from the podcast discussion, was that the people who make this game and have been developing the game since essentially 2K took it over is a Japanese developer named Yuke's, if I can remember correctly. And from what the members of our Discord were telling us, thankfully, and filling us in on something that we're not really as involved in, is that Yuke's has been developing this single-handedly for so long, and there's no competition in the space. So what they did to try and give themselves a competition was actually split teams and have one team make it one year and one team make it the next year.
It's like they're competing against
with
themselves.
The second team being broken off for a while and supporting the studio to kind of get used to it. It's what it sounds like. I'm not completely abreast of the situation, but that's essentially what it is, and that this year is the off studio's turn to make a game, and we see that they either weren't ready or that this was not the idea that they had in mind. I understand the idea that I think even like games like MLB The Show will probably stagnate if they aren't already considered to be stagnated by fans. Sales don't reflect that it is. But sooner or later, when you don't have competition in your space at all, there's less innovation typically because there's not somebody trying to having that eating will at you to try and one up the other team. Or,
You're right.
You know, and it's something that even as a healthy competition is just nice to have. Of, oh man, they actually had a great idea. What's our great idea? How can we keep this competition train rolling so that we both end up with better games?
Yeah,
and that's a fun thing. So definitely a great point on that. But you know, I think the same thing. There's plenty of series that you start thinking of names that would leave it, and the perceived quality drop, and it scares you. And I think even if people don't have series that have automatically had that happen to them, I think that there are plenty of though. I think Resident Evil is one series that a lot of people actually, you know, after 4, whenever the creator moved on, a lot of people who may not even have known that realized that the series took a sharp turn and how things played out with 5 and 6. It's definitely something I think happens. I think that you see that in games like Devil May Cry, where DMC comes out, and even though it's not a bad game necessarily in its own right, I do think it's one of those things where it's going to be hard to touch base with the people. It's going to be a perceived quality drop from the people that love so much of the other games.
Yeah.
And it just strikes that weird area in between where what is it that keeps you loving a franchise, and what is it that scares you that the franchise may change? That's a different question for everybody. One more over here on Twitter, Mr. Jason G says, I'm a huge wrestling and video game fan. A game like 2K should be everything I want, but they really dropped the ball with this one. Ukes, so I was correct, not developing it really shows, even though I think, unless I'm wrong, somebody please tell me, Ukes technically broke off and they are developing it, but it's an off team, or maybe the team broke off and went to a different name. I'm not sure. Absurd that last year's entry is better than this year's, is what he continues with. I hope they learn from this and only get better. But yes, to answer your question, it does hamper my interest. There are way too many games releasing during this time, and a game releasing like that makes my decision on which game to purchase much easier, which is an inadvertent actually benefit to something like this happening.
Yeah.
Is it can inadvertently help you whittle down which games you're actually going to buy if you get into that period of, there's 4 games coming out in this time period that I want. I can only afford this many of them. How do I determine which one? One of them just got knocked out of the park for you in general. It's like, okay, don't want that one. So... but appreciate the feedback, guys. I think this was an interesting question, and again, I'm surprised to see. I know it's big. Of course, the games sell well normally, so it's not like I shouldn't have expected a bigger group of our community to be involved in liking those games. It just surprised me a little bit. But with that said, Saul, unless you want to add anything else, we will go ahead and scooch off into the... Oh, actually, before we scooch off in the news, I'm going to take this little interstitial to announce our final... Halloween wrap-up, if you're okay with that.
Yeah.
Okay. What we want to do, as you can clearly see from my dumb outfit and Saul's lack of one, I'm actually with Saul. I normally don't dress up all that much during Halloween, but I had a Halloween party to go to yesterday that my wife wanted me to go to, so I decided to lean in and just do it.
Look at you.
And I just repeated it today just to have fun. But in the spirit of Halloween, and since this is the last episode, the first episode for the Halloween set, we did a small giveaway. We're going to up that a little bit. I'm going to go to a $20 PSN card. And what I want you guys to do is, if you listen to this episode or watch this episode, does not matter. I want you to go and send us through whatever means you want to, be it an instant message or a direct message if you don't want others to see it immediately. Though I would prefer that it be something that people let us show, or maybe even a thread. We'll go to Twitter. I want you guys to send us in pictures of you in your costumes, and we want to essentially do a costume contest where me and Saul will pick our favorite costume that we see, and whoever is our favorite costume is going to be the winner. This is very different for us. Most of our giveaways are completely random for the most part, or first come, first serve. This is the first time we're going to do one where we're going to be the judge of who wins based off of what we think is best. And I'll tell you, I'm just going to go off of what I think looks most best, or different things. However you want, if you want your picture to help sell the idea of what you're doing, send it in, hoping that this is fun and has a good time. And whoever wins will get a $20 PSN card to do with as they please. But from there, unless Saul wants to chime in, we're going to go to news.
No lewds. Kiki.
Kiki, please do not wear that special jock strap that you put a picture of in the Discord. That's all I ask.
Not of him, by the way.
Not of him. That is fair. Join our Discord. It's
and
quite
technically,
fun.
He didn't put it in there either. Richard did. You're just getting all the information wrong.
True, but it was on his Twitter. So you're right. This is getting out of hand. We're going to go ahead and go to news. And the first bit of news actually kind of comes in to the community stake and last episode, which is WWE 2K20's publisher, of course 2K Games, has taken to Twitter to say that it has been listening closely to feedback that is being shared online, and they are, quote, working hard to investigate these concerns and address them as necessary, end quote, with an initial patch aiming to launch in the next 2 weeks, with others to follow as needed. Similar to reports during Anthem's launch, there are people saying that Sony support has offered them refunds due to the state of the game's launch being so buggy and so broken, which goes in direct contrast to Sony's newly implemented refund policy, but might be being granted due to the specific high-profile nature of not only the release, but the issues related to the release. This is one of those weird things where I do think that this should be a time where Sony subverts, essentially goes around the policy and just says, despite what the policy is, due to the state of this game, and I think that this is good for any high-profile game that moves forward. These are games that are going to sell well off of word of mouth alone, and in terms of name recognition. I feel like there has to be some moments where refunds are given despite what their policy says. Maybe that even leads to a policy change in the long run. I mean, like I said, at least Sony took a step in a direction. I'm not going to say it was right, but I think if this is true, and it's still probably going to be based off of who you're dealing with, this is at least a little bit of a step in the better direction. And I think it's fair enough. While, I've moved stuff around. Ubisoft have come out to say that their last two major AAA releases in the way of The Division 2 and Ghost Recon Breakpoint were both considered commercial failures that performed well under expectation. While The Division 2 was at least critically acclaimed, the same could not be said for Breakpoint, which was considered both an critically and commercial failure and underperformed expectations by far. Ubisoft came out to kind of talk about it, and I'm a little curious as to where you stand on this, because I think for a long time, you were kind of the idea like, oh, Destiny 2 coming out is not a problem. Destiny 3 eventually coming out is not a problem, in the sense of, the original plan for Destiny, for anybody who doesn't know, was that it was going to be a 10-year game. And as we've learned, that statement didn't necessarily mean one game that goes on 10 years. Apparently, that was just encompassing Destiny as a franchise to be at least a bare minimum 10-year experience.
Yeah.
Now, what gets interesting about this is Ubisoft's reasoning behind this is that both of these games are live service games, and one more so mimicking the style of Destiny, where you get on, have a shared world, play with people, and do missions together in a very different setup, whereas Ghost Recon's Breakpoint is like a game that you can play by yourself in an open world or play with friends. But they're both live service games, and their points were saying that the two games did not have enough to differentiate from the other game to where the differences that were there were not able to shine due to the two familiarities of it and the fact that they released too close to their original game, when live services benefit from existing live service games benefit from years of optimization and changes. And I think that that's an interesting thing, because I do remember a lot of people saying that even though The Division 2 was critically acclaimed, plenty of the players felt like The Division 1 was better in a lot of ways because it benefited from learning and time of being able to fix that. And I think that we both agree that Destiny 2 had the same trajectory, where Destiny 1 had a lot of time to learn from its mistakes, and by the time that you left Destiny 1 for Destiny 2, Destiny 1 was in great hands. Mm-hmm. Just for Destiny 2 to be better at launch than Destiny 1 at launch, but worse than Destiny 1 at the time of Destiny 2's launch, in a lot of people's opinions.
Yeah.
I guess my question for you specifically, because you were always a big proponent of like Destiny 2 releasing as a separate game is not a problem, and Destiny 3 releasing as a separate game is not a problem, even though they're only 2 to 3 years out from their original releases. Mm-hmm. 3 on average is what it seems like they were going for. That may not be the case now that they're not with Activision, but what do you feel like that's something that's out? Because The Division was out for about 3 years before The Division 2 hit, but they're claiming too close to each other and not enough differences make these games to where it almost sounds like they prefer that they would have just continued investing in The Division 1.
Well, I think that the problem with that is that Destiny 2 seems to be the king of looter shooters in terms of a game with a service.
I agree with that. And the only competition they have that I think really, really goes against them, but is a very different market, is Warframe, with a free-to-play market.
And it's high competition, so that when a game made by Ubisoft like Division or even Breakpoint comes out, if they can't dedicate enough resources to keep it updated and changed, on at least a a quarterly scale like Destiny can, people are going to lose interest and just go back to Destiny for the most part. And that's going to be the downfall of all these games because they come out trying to be so games as a service, Anthem being one of them, and just falling flat because they don't have a proper plan of how to continue to support the game enough to keep numbers engaged.
Yeah, or if they do, in the case of like Anthem, it gets pushed back so much that even though I think that
people just lose interest.
I think the first event was actually good. The Cataclysm was fun. It would have been a more of a star on their board than so much of a smear on their board for the game if it had actually released in the original plan, which was 3 months out from original release, which is about right. Like you said, quarterly big changes.
Yeah, quarterly big updates or big refreshes to the game keeps it fresh. But games like Division that can't, it almost seems like these games don't have enough support from teams.
I'd say that looking at the Division 1, I think it had it, but I think by trying to split it off and have them go towards Division 2 and leaving it high and dry gets weird. I actually think that I agree with you. Destiny 2 looks like it's going to follow a much better path than Destiny 1 did in terms of how it's going to choose to end. Destiny 1 felt like it ended abruptly. And Destiny 2 seems like they're doing way more to say, hey, not only are we doing big expansions between every year, like essentially every year you're going to get one big expansion, like we saw with the Taken King and then Rise of Iron, and then this time around we have Forsaken, and then now we have Shadowkeep, and this is coming from somebody who's not dived back into Shadowkeep yet. But the bigger point is that Destiny even found a better way to go about things than they did with Destiny 1 and Destiny 2, with the idea of letting seasons find a way to refresh the game every couple of months in between the big expansions. So it's like you have a big expansion, then you have small seasons that do come with changes, additional story, new game modes, different things like that you didn't see in the first Destiny very rarely. Instead, you just saw individual events like the Dawning and the Halloween events and Sparrow Racing, which worked to some degree, but I don't think that they were as successful as I've seen people coming back into Destiny for seasons has become.
Oh, yeah. No, dude, seasons and then these expansions, Forsaken and Shadowkeep, have really, really refreshed it. Whereas, what was the name of a big release for Division expansion?
I'm going to be fair, we both played Division, but way less than we did Destiny. So I do think that there was one. I know that there was one very big game-changing one for the Division 1.
It's the fact that we can't remember the name of it, though.
But
even people who don't play Destiny know the name Forsaken and Shadowkeep.
I don't know if that's true. You're probably right, because I think Destiny is at least, like you said, it's the king. So it's almost like if you're interested in gaming and you've heard of Destiny, the chances of you knowing the names of those is higher.
Yeah, and
than the Division.
That's the point right there. Is that Division doesn't even have that. Division doesn't even have the fact that it doesn't have a presence big enough that the common gamer who doesn't even play the game would know the expansions. Whereas you hear about Shadowkeep and Forsaken so much out and about that people know those names. They may not know what the exact changes are, what it means, but they know that, hey, I heard good things about Destiny once Forsaken came out, or Shadowkeep came out.
Yeah,
I can't say that with Division, and I played Division.
Ryan is yelling at his phone right now, like it's called the blank update. Yeah. And I will say that's why I'm being a little iffy on it. I didn't play enough of Division, and I played it so late into it coming out that I probably just missed it, and that's why it doesn't resonate with me. But I think Saul's still right in the sense of, even when I don't play Destiny for large swaths of time, which is plenty, happens a lot. Last time I played Destiny right now is probably like 4 months ago.
Yeah, I would say it's worth it to go back in, at least for the story and Shadowkeep.
Well, yeah, sure, but what I get at is that even though I don't play that anymore at the time, and there's been large swaths of time I didn't play Destiny 1. I played Destiny 1 at launch and then didn't play again until Rise of Iron, which is 2 years, and I still knew of everything happening in Destiny 1. Maybe that's because...
It's getting harder now.
Yeah, maybe that's because I had friends that were doing it, whereas Ryan is one of the only people I know who was just really, really big into the Division and talks about it often.
Yeah.
Whereas I know plenty of people who talk about Destiny often. I feel like I come across more people, at least in day-to-day life here, that are gamers, and if you mention Destiny, they go, yes, I play Destiny, or I have played Destiny, and I enjoyed it until this, or I enjoyed it after this. And it does seem to be different. If nothing else, like you said, the word of mouth around Destiny seems to be so much more than the Division.
Yeah, so. And I understand what you mean. So
Saul got a poop. I had to say that out loud because it's important.
Happy Halloween, people.
Yeah, he's going to poop out pumpkin confetti, all that stuff. I'm going to keep rolling through on here. Yakuza 7 Like a Dragon is getting a new gameplay reveal hitting October 28th, the day this episode drops, for anybody who's listening to this right there and is interested in that. It comes off the back of the recent showcase where it was revealed and lightly shown that the game would be ditching its real-time brawler combat in favor of a turn-based approach that many people are saying is reminiscent of Persona. So if you've never been big into Yakuza because you didn't care much for the combat style, but you were interested in maybe the story, this might be the way for you to kind of dip in and get into the Yakuza world with a very different play style. So if you're a fan of Persona and wanted to try Yakuza, bam, here's your chance. From what I hear from a lot of people, it's not required to play the other games, which is much of what my decisions to play Kiwami before Zero or what it came from. A lot of people were saying don't play Kiwami because it's a remake and it's based in older mechanics in an attempt to be a remake, and the story is a little lesser in terms of what it pulls off than Zero, which plays better and has a more interesting and compelling story, from what I heard from a lot of people. But I do think from plenty of people now that I've mentioned that coming back around, I've had a lot of supportive people saying it doesn't matter when you jump into Yakuza because, like I said last episode, people jump into Yakuza at any given time. There are people that started playing Yakuza with 3 on the PS4 and didn't play 0 because it wasn't out yet, didn't play 1 or 2 on the PS2 because they didn't have the opportunity, and then they didn't get to play them until they came back around on PS4 with Kiwami and Kiwami 2, which were remakes of the first and second game for PS2, and then Zero, which is a brand new prequel. So I think it's you can't play every game chronologically, even if you're coming in later. I think you just got to jump in where it seems interesting to you, and if you love it, go back and play the other games. But going back into Gran Turismo, like we talked about a little bit earlier in our community's take, keeping in tradition, Gran Turismo Sport's upcoming update is teasing which vehicles will be added, among other additions, by posting an image of a black background with light highlights, lightly silhouetting the body of 4 different cars. This is something they've been doing for a while. I think it's a great way to go on Twitter and get people and fans engaged, trying to guess what the cars are. It's a great marketing stunt. It gets people talking. Kind of gives you an idea of how much of your community is really active and gives a reason for them to be more active. It's kind of like a little game to play of here it is. And they don't even ask you what the cars are. It's just people's immediate sense of mystery and wanting to figure out what it is will put them going, that looks like this looks like this, and then people start working together, very similar to what we saw when PT dropped, when it was people working together to try and solve all the puzzles so that they could get through and beat it within the first day, which was cool. Update hits sometime this week, which is after a GT event that happened over the weekend, which we're recording this on the weekend, so it works out. Next up, Borderlands 3 taps into the Halloween spirit with an extended spooky event in the way of its Bloody Harvest limited time event. The update changes the main menu to an appropriate theme, gives a repeatable mission that must be completed in order to reach Heck, which is the setting for the event that tasks players to collect Hectoplasm. Once enough is collected, Maurice opens a portal that leads you to Captain Hunt and his undead minions, and this is just part of the theme festivities. I'm not going to give it all away. It's more than that. But alongside this are improvements to the overall stability of the game, fixing crashing bugs, while a performance patch is planned for November. The event itself lasts from October 24th to December 5th, giving people plenty of time to participate if they want to. Glad to hear that the stability things are fixed, because even though I've not turned my PlayStation on this last week, I had a lot of offers from our friends and community members to jump on and help me get through this annoying boss fight that just crashed on me after 25 minutes of playing and not dying. Just a weird situation that the game had a problem with, specifically for my character. And my gear set, since I didn't do grinding, but whatever, wasn't an issue until it crashed. Got grateful people that are going to help, and this means that there's less of a chance that it'll crash again. So I'm hoping that continues to be the case. And again, performance, which is not just completely abysmal, but is abysmal in times when you're on dual, same screen co-op and whatnot, couch co-op. So need to get that up and going. Next thing on the list, I'm incredibly happy to hear Focus Home Interactive have found great successes in both A Plague Tale: Innocence, which is one of my favorite games of the year so far. Great game if you like more linear story-based games that have some combat and some puzzle-based solutions and just an interesting story and mechanic setup. I love the game. We'll be talking about it more as we get closer to our Game Awards based episodes. And of course, Greedfall, which is also another game I recently loved by them, with both titles having very successful launches that exceeded expectations, leading to their first 6 months of the fiscal year posting revenues of £79.8 million, which is up 80% in comparison to the same period last year. In case you were curious as why I use pounds, Focus Home Interactive is a European company. So there you go. I actually think they're based in France, if I'm remembering correctly, which is where plenty of these developers are based. I think that's both where Asobi Studios, who made A Plague Tale Innocence, and Greedfall's developer Spiders are both stationed. So good for them. And I love those games. If you haven't played either of them and have any form of curiosity based off of the things I've said, I urge you to go play them. I don't know how long this is going to be true, but A Plague Tale Innocence is 40% off, and it was already a $50 game. So you're just that much ahead of the thing. You're paying $25-$30 for a fantastic game. So go grab it, pick it up. And Focus Home Interactive continues to just blow me away with coming back so strongly with these AA games that are performing very well, while THQ Nordic is doing their work as well to show that there's plenty of people that still like AA games and that there's a market for it. And if they keep coming out and doing interesting stuff, I think they have a good life ahead of them. Next up on the news section, a wild rumor has surfaced that Sony's London studio, the team behind the recent PSVR exclusive Blood and Truth, are helming up a PSVR iteration of the Guerrilla Games' popular franchise Horizon Zero Dawn. The rumor comes from a pundit who worked in the VR scene for years, and he says he's unsure if the game is intended for the PS4 or PS5, since the PS5 does intend to support not only the current VR headset for its first few years and of course onward, but there are plans, as far as we've heard from Sony, to release a second iteration of the headset. So could be that as well. I think London Studio is clearly the team for this if it does end up being true. They recently had, of course, Blood and Truth come out, which I think is just great. I think they'd be able to adapt the series because they have, of course, industry topping standards they've set with Blood and Truth. I think it had top-notch production values, which I do think is something that a lot of people are expecting and wanting to see in these newer VR games. They don't want it to just be little experiences. They want to make sure that what they're buying is full-on, fully-fledged experiences. And I think that between the gameplay sequences that I've seen from Blood and Truth and, of course, the production values for just the character models and everything, these are the people right here. If you're going to do this and you're going to do this in a real compelling way, you need people who are industry leading, and this is one of them. I think Sony's very smart to let London Studio go through this, do a game like this, take a big risk on a VR exclusive game to this caliber, and I think they've seen great returns from it. I hope we see alongside this next piece of news, I'll go into that and then we'll continue. One more juicy rumor, again, we don't know if it's true, is that the PS4 will be $150 this Black Friday, with the Pro being available for $299, which is $100 off of its price point. Believable to me, because if you think about last year, we saw a $200 Spider-Man bundle, which was not only a console but a bundled in game. That was $200. It would not surprise me to see either a standalone PS4 at $150 or even a little bit further, a PS4 with another Sony published game packed in again at $150, just for a sheer value representation. And hey, look, Saul's back. But, you know, to me, I think that the two things, I think, of course, the PS4 being down to $150 for Black Friday is a believable thing, and I think it's high time that the Pro drops down to $299, even if it's just for Black Friday, and I would not be surprised if we see a permanent price drop for the Pro to $300 next year in preparation for the PS5, considering the price expectations of it as well. What I was going to go with that is, on top of these two things, I do think that the PS4 system itself needs to be down for Black Friday. That's great to get that last little bit out where they're trying to meet PS2 numbers, and then PS4 Pro numbers being helped by $299 price point. I really hope that with that VR news, and if it's true, and just in general for VR, and this is something that even Liam said in our Discord, one of our community members, I hope that Sony put a big push behind the VR units this Black Friday as well. They've done it in the past, and I think if they really do it again, definitely with big games like Blood and Truth coming out, and they do the right bundle at the right price and get people to get into these VR units at $200 or whatever it be. If you can do a $200 PSVR bundle with at least one tie-in big game from them, Blood and Truth would be a great, obvious example of that since it's published by them. No real loss, just gaining people getting this. It makes the VR market that much stronger, that many more people involved, which means that there's that much more of a future for better games for it. So I think it's time that we see a really big push from Sony, and I do agree with Liam's stance on that. They really got to start pushing even harder this PSVR. They've been doing really well. It's been pushed harder than any other peripheral they've ever done, and technically it is a peripheral.
Yeah.
Because it can't be played without the PS4. And good for them. I mean, you know, whether it's for you or not, you know, I think that there's people like Saul here who wanted to do the Oculus
Quest.
Yeah, I couldn't remember if it was the one after the Go. It's still a standalone headset that doesn't work with any wires or anything like that. Because that technology-wise to you is already above the PSVR, which of course it is. But I think PSVR does have a lot of compelling games that are just happen to be exclusive to it. So there's a market for both right now, and if PS5 does end up coming with a really great headset, then we get a good thing. You know, that's exactly what we need. Last one. You got anything you want to add to that? Since you're backing around.
A little snippet though is that yesterday morning I was playing Destiny with Joe.
Yeah.
And I mentioned to him, like, you know, with my new job, this is probably going to be the first year that I've ever gone Black Friday shopping with you and potentially Blaze.
Yeah.
And he's actually going to be in town for Thanksgiving, and he's probably going to join with us. Yeah.
All right,
it's going to be fun.
Good. And then we can get him on an episode of
Dickish at Best. Oh, and maybe we can all get together for actual Thanksgiving night too. So
yeah, that would be fantastic.
Lead into Thanksgiving dinner out to Black Friday.
All right, our boy Joe is working on his own podcast. We'll let him plug it whenever he comes in on our podcast. But
yeah,
he's a great guy. Anyway, going on, and actually Saul gave me this pro tip, but I'm going to extend it to y'all. Friendly tip: Death Stranding spoilers are abound on the internet. So if you were hoping to go into that game completely blind or as blind as possible, be very, very careful on the internet in the weeks coming up to its launch.
Specifically, the Death Stranding subreddit, which, from what I was reading, I was browsing the PS4 subreddit yesterday, and for what I was reading on there, they've actually kind of quarantined the spoilers. Pretty much, they've cleaned out the subreddit. But I'm still sure that if you go visit that subreddit, you're going to see some asshole commenting, you know, hey, this happens and this happens.
Yeah, and of course, mods have to jump on top, and that's across all things, be it Twitter or anything. And I don't know if Twitter really won't do anything, and not that they should to an extent. I don't know what Twitter's policy is on that. I don't know if you can report.
I don't think there is one.
I don't know if you can report a post for being spoiler filled with something that's not actually broke street date yet. I don't know. That's a very weird setup that I do not completely understand. But at least on things like Reddit, where there's mods who get to determine what the subreddit rules are, they do have to contend with people who are jumping on there and creating new full-on posts, not even comments, but full-on Reddit posts from the ground up to try and get on the home screen of saying this and this and this happens in Death Stranding. And they got to try and be on top of that so that the very smallest amount of people can see that. And I'm sure that those mods are on like overdrive for these next 2 weeks, just trying to keep people from being able to spoil that game. But I know that I'm trying to go in with as little as possible, so I would hate to see that, be ruined. Now that we are reaching to Fallout 76, though, I'm going to go ahead and say,
main topic time, kind of.
Essentially, we are moving more or less into the main topic, which is somehow a mix of these two, but I think it's a good one. We'll get to that in a minute. We'll go ahead and hit the news first and kind of go into that. So the first piece of news that we're going to expound upon and really have more talk around is, despite a rocky path for the game, Fallout 76 has managed to find a spot with its players months after release and continued to slowly try and improve the game. Bethesda announced the arrival of Fallout First recently, a subscription service that costs $12.99 a month or $99 a year, with subscribers getting access to private worlds, a scrap box that offers unlimited storage for crafting components, a placeable fast travel point called the Survival Tent that offers coverage for your basic needs in the game that you can set up anywhere, a monthly sum of atoms for the atomic shop, I think it's like 1,600, an exclusive armor outfit, and icons and emotes that are exclusive to the subscription service as well. The service was already being criticized for its price and even its general existence as a whole, but now it seems that the service doesn't quite hold up its end of the not so much a bargain. Players report that the most desirable feature of the sub, which I think everybody can, of course, land on, is the private worlds. For a game like that does make sense. They're not quite what players expected, with players from your friends list being able to immediately see and join your private world without any ability on your part to restrict the access as you see fit. Huge problem. That is a huge problem. I would hate to see that. Just because you're friends with somebody does not mean that you want them coming in and playing with you all the time. There's a nice part of the reason that you'd want a private world is I just want to play with this group of people. I don't want people to be able to freely join my instance. I'm just going to be like, hey, private world, unless I invite you, you can't come in. That should be the basic setup, and I'm surprised that that's not what we've seen. But, oh well. Another issue reported by players is that the worlds are claimed to be newly created instances, but some have found that as soon as they go into their private world that should be new, there are already dead NPCs and already looted areas in the world, seemingly suggesting that these are not new instances, but instead recycled instances being sold as new worlds. Again, huge problem. Even if this is just turns out to be a bug, huge problem. The next feature, the scrap box that we mentioned earlier, also appears to have issues with players reporting problems with the scrap box deposits vanishing in instances. Bethesda have issued a statement saying that these features will be getting updates to work as users would expect them, but this is just another big misstep towards the optics of a game that was already plagued with a rough launch and an uphill climb to convince players to stay with it and find a player base, which it managed to do, and they come up with this idea. And I really try to stay away from just crapping on Fallout 76 too much. We did it a lot early on because I did really feel like this was a weird use of a great franchise, definitely one that sold so well for them. But right now, this is coming off of a year of them, I think, more or less being on the upswing. Not every single update was taken with open arms. Not all of them worked exactly as people wanted, but people were at the point that they were willing to give this game a fair shot and a fair chance, and people were playing it. It had built a player base. Some people were coming back to it who swore they'd never play it or never play it again.
You missed one of the biggest things about the outrage about this.
Oh, what?
I just had to Google it to make sure, but this is the only way and currently in Fallout 76 that you can get the NRC Ranger armor. The New Vegas.
I mentioned it.
In here?
Yeah.
Where?
They get an exclusive armor outfit.
Oh, but you didn't mention which one. It's the
still,
New Vegas outfit.
Yeah, don't get me wrong.
That's been the number one requested item in 76 since launch.
It's been the number one requested item, and then this subscription brings a lot of things that were number one request. Number one requested item was the
tent mechanism style thing.
But the main thing that people wanted was the ability for private servers.
Yeah.
And now, it was a weird thing because Bethesda comes out, they say, hey, we're at their private servers are getting added to the game soon. Everybody was like, yes, awesome, finally. And then suddenly it became, oh, private servers are going to cost. Okay. And then it was, oh, private servers are going to cost $13 a month. And if that's the only feature you want, you're paying that much. And of course, that price, as far as they're concerned, is at least somewhat deserving as far as they're concerned, again, because of all these extra things that you may not care about at all. I'm surprised they didn't try and do a tiered one. If you just want private worlds, $5 a month. If you want private worlds and Scrapbox, $7 a month. If you want private worlds, Scrapbox, and the exclusive armor and whatever you want to call that, $10 a month. If you want the ability to get the atoms on top of that, it goes up $3 more. I don't necessarily know that that's a better solution, but it just seems weird that you would lock the most requested feature, and probably for many the only feature they really want from this subscription, behind something that costs so much. This is more than Netflix, and Netflix is not cheap already in comparison to a lot of the competition.
This is more than Amazon Prime.
Yeah.
And with Amazon Prime, you not only get 2-day shipping, you get videos on demand.
You get Kindle books for free.
Yeah.
With Prime. So it's, and I'm not saying that, of course, they can't be the exact same thing. I understand that. But it does get to a point of who lands on this pricing, who lands on the idea to put a game that just got through, essentially building itself back up. Very similar to Elder Scrolls Online. Elder Scrolls Online came out, launched not as much as a mess, but did not really land the way that they expected it to, just for them to build up and now have a huge player base that really does love the game. This is the same situation, more or less. Instead of being smart with it and thinking we have to be very careful and community friendly, like we've seen other games do for a long time, be it free-to-play games like Warframe or Destiny, where they try and be, hey, here's what we're doing. Even though this is going to be something that you pay for, this is what you're paying for, and this is what we're using the money for. Like Saul always said, it was really cool to see that they put out the item, what was it again, Saul, where they used all the funds to make a mission?
You're talking about the black spindle, aka the Whisper of the Worm sniper rifle in Destiny 2. They released
it was an ornament,
for it, a skin, and the amount of people who bought that skin allowed them to fund a brand new mission to bring back Outbreak Prime, and they used only the funding from that one skin, and it funded that mission's development entirely.
Yeah, and see that's one of those weird things where it's like if you're going to charge people for something, make it optional. Yeah. Which of course this technically is optional.
Technically,
right?
Yes, but it puts things people want behind a paywall.
Yes, a little too much. You know, if it's not saying in this case, it's not saying, well, hey, if you wanted Whisper of the Worm at all, you had to pay. Instead, it's like, hey, if you want Whisper of the Worm, you can get it in the game. If you want this special skin that ultimately doesn't do anything, don't worry about it. It's paid for, but the pay is going to go towards something that everybody benefits from.
Pretty much, yeah.
Right? And I guess technically Bethesda does have that argument as the one benefit to everybody who pays this copious amount. This is way too much. But for everybody who does dive in and pay for it, that money does go in and hopefully would be the excuse would be that it benefits everybody in the game in the long run. But that doesn't mean...
We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. But I just find this to be very similar to what we were talking about with NBA 2K20 and how it felt like the people behind the marketing were tone deaf. This seems like the people behind and ultimately this is the business decision, right? I don't think that Bethesda people who have been working on these features necessarily, the Bethesda Game Studios people were thinking, oh, we're making this just to put behind a paywall. What this very likely was somebody in the business thing going, you know what, people are wanting these features and they're really, really asking for them. What if we put it behind a paywall and try to make them extra money?
Exactly.
We can't. The game has already been announced as a free to play. Like once you buy it, you play forever. But there are servers to contend with. There are updates that we have to think about getting money for. So since we can't charge a normal subscription, why don't we make a
subscription is going too far. But like what you said is like essentially something to do to unlock these things, like in tiers would have been better.
Again, better. I don't know to what extent. I don't think I'd want 4 tiers. But I mean, if you told me that, hey, if the only, really 2 tiers, do you just want Private Worlds? If Private Worlds is literally all you want, $3 to $5 a month, somewhere in that ballpark, I think more people would be like, I don't necessarily want to pay for it, but you know what? It's a feature I really like, and it's not that much money. And you can kind of because if you think about it, private servers are a thing that Minecraft uses, and people do pay for them.
Yeah,
but they're very cheap.
It's also Minecraft, which is one of the
biggest games,
ever.
Yeah, actually, I'm gonna go look real quick.
I'm really curious as to see. I doubt we'll ever get it, but the numbers released for who actually opts into Fallout first, I would bet it's under 10,000 people. I would bet it's almost under 5,000 people.
Well, I don't even currently know exactly what the player count for 76 is.
I doubt there's something I could figure out right now on Google that would tell me the current player count for that game. But I would be surprised if it's once again above 10,000.
Yeah.
Rooster Teeth made a game. I forgot what that game was called, but on Steam it went from like 22,000 people daily for like a week in a row to like less than 100. Like it's just one of those that people played because it was a Rooster Teeth game, and then once it kind of fell off the charts, nobody played it ever again. And it's a multiplayer game that you need people to play with.
Okay, so just for we brought up Minecraft as a comparison point, and Minecraft Realms is what it's called for the private server setup for Minecraft, and that is across all. So it has added benefits as well. That's across all systems besides PlayStation at the moment, but otherwise, if you're on Xbox phone or on Nintendo Switch or computer, everybody plays together, as far as I'm aware. And 2 friends. So this is pick this option to own a realm which supports simultaneous play for you and 2 friends. So 3 people overall is $3.99. Okay,
that's not bad.
$7.99 if you want it to be a realm that supports simultaneous play with you and 10 people. So 11 total. $7.99. Now, there is no extra. You don't get these extra skins or anything that's immediately being said. And there is a free trial. Again, there's a lot of upsides to the way they're trying to do this. And as Saul said, this is a bigger game. So I think if Bethesda came out and said, hey, Private Worlds, I should say this, Minecraft is a bigger game that announced this feature at a high point. Fallout 76 is a game that stumbled into coming onto the market, just reached a comfortable point, and decided at a comfortable point, instead of when they reached a real high, to say, hey, we're going to do charged private servers, but they're going to be reasonably priced, $5 for a server. for whatever it is.
Yeah.
Instead, Minecraft's over here, one of the biggest games at all, and it not only is tiered depending on what you want. If it's only you and 2 friends, if that's only people that you have that play Minecraft, you can get away with paying $4. If it's you and a lot of friends, like what would be our situation probably, $8.
I wonder,
is
this game on Steam?
76?
Yeah,
I think so.
Or is it on the Bethesda store as an actual external game?
Oh, you know what? I think you're right. I think Fallout 76 did subvert.
I wonder if they did that so that you can't see real time player counts. Because I just now
won't be on Steam at launch.
Is it on Steam now? I wonder.
It sounds like it's not on Steam at all.
Yeah, and it's been a year and a half after launch. Didn't it come out last summer?
Oh, it is bringing Fallout 76 to Steam at some point later in 2019. I don't know if it's happened yet.
No, it's not.
But out of curiosity, that's your main reason, just to see if you can see concurrent player count?
That's why I'm curious.
I mean, it definitely does help. People are not going to want to buy a game if they can clearly see that not enough people are playing it. That's one of those things that happens across a lot of games. RuneScape has that. You can go on and log in and see the player count in real time. That way you can, if you want to, you can go through that thing in your mind of, do I want to commit time to this because there's enough other players to make this worth its time? But I don't want to spend too terribly much time on that. I guess, one of the things we're talking about here, and I think we could probably go into the next piece of news, which does tie into something we feel here. I think that the main part for this, for me, is that Fallout 76 launched with tons of problems, and now that they finally reached a point, it's just reiterating what I've already said essentially, but now that they've reached a comfortable point, I don't know why you essentially chop off your own, your own potential for further growth by doing something like this in a time that doesn't feel removed enough from the problem. I'd feel the exact same way. Anthem is a game I enjoyed, despite clearly seeing its flaws and understanding them. If Anthem did the same thing, let's just to try and put it onto something I like, so it didn't seem like, I haven't played Fallout 76. I do like the Fallout series. Fallout 4 was less than what I expected. So in case you're worrying that this is something that comes from me not caring for this game, Anthem is a game I enjoyed a lot in Platinum, then played over 100 hours, probably 120 hours. But if this same thing came and Anthem said, hey, we're going to do a thing where you can get only players in your world come together, we're making the game open world, all that stuff. If they come out and said that, I would say the same thing. This is not far enough removed from a litany of mistakes that have been made for this to seem like a good idea at this time. Either hold these features and don't do them, or say, hey, for the first year, these features are going to be free, but after that time period, we're going to move to a paid subscription service. And you could even bring it out and word it in the way of marketing, saying, what we're doing with this game and with this update is we're bringing a highly requested feature for free to everybody for a 1-year period as a way to say, thank you for supporting the game in its rough times.
Because that's realistically who's all that's still playing.
And bring us up, and then you say, once we're a year in and hopefully the game is doing even better and we have a bigger group, we will move this feature to a paid feature and be more reasonably priced than this. And I think you'd have something that optically looks a lot better. It's going to look like something that's cautious of the fans and conscious of the fans, and looking at it and saying, these are people that have supported us. These are people coming back. Give them something for free for a little bit. Plenty of games have done that. Plenty of games have said, hey, this is something that's going to be free for this window, and then eventually you will pay for it. There's been DLC that's been given out that way. There's been all sorts of stuff. I think The Witcher 3 had DLC they gave everybody for free before, I think a year after they finally put it behind a paywall. Could be wrong on that, but I know there is games that have done this. For sure. But moving on to the other thing that I think Saul kind of wanted to tie these things together with, and I do think it's a good point, as entering into the season of delays following Rage 2, The Last of Us 2 has been delayed despite confirming its date just over a month ago. The game can now be expected to launch on May 29th, 3 months after its original February 21st date. This date has reportedly internally delayed the originally unannounced plans for the Ghost of Tsushima to release in the first half of 2020 to now be aiming for the second half of the year. Vampire Bloodlines 2, another game, was delayed by publisher Paradox Interactive from its original Q1 2020 window, which was a very crowded window, to a late 2020 release. They say that this is not due to the crowded nature, even though I do think that's at least part of it, or it's an added benefit. But again, in order to give the game extra polish and make sure it's the best that it can be, for it's a pretty large game. And then, of course, in Ubisoft's court, they have delayed 3 titles with Watch Dogs Legion, Rainbow Six Quarantine, and Gods and Monsters, all games that were planned to be released before April of 2020. will now be releasing after April 2020. Ubisoft's pirate-themed Skull and Bones, which was going to be coming this year and last year, and then again infinitely delayed, has now been announced to be pushed back until after March 2021. So again, that is one of those situations where that game is probably going to be a next-gen title, and then the other titles, because they're being pushed so far back, have mentioned that they have plans to optimize them for next-gen, meaning that they will likely be cross-gen to some degree, whether it's a legitimate cross-gen release or what we've been talking about, the potential for backwards compatibility that has a patch that works on the PS5 to give it that much more stuff. We don't know.
Yeah.
But Saul had something to say about this, which I think was an interesting tie-in to specifically the way Fallout 76 has been handled, and even Anthem, as we invoke that name.
Well, and just to make it clear, I don't have problems with delays. I don't think that delays are inevitably, or not inevitably, but I don't think delays inherently are bad. They're almost always meant so they can optimize their games and push out any extra bugs that they can and make it as stable as possible before release. Obviously, some games come out, and it's a very, very strong point that this game should have been delayed until it was fixed. And like Brett said, Anthem is definitely one of those this year. Fallout 76 is definitely one of those titles. So I'll often see people automatically getting upset that Last of Us was delayed, and as well as some of these other games. While it does make sense to get mad or upset about a delay because you're not going to be able to play it that much longer, or I guess that much sooner, but I do think that it's kind of pointless to hold like this really cool kind of like event, and the whole purpose of the event is the release date, only to delay it 2 weeks later. There's
almost a month later, but yeah.
Is it a month later?
Yeah,
like
it was
weeks.
September 24th was the state of play, and that was the same day as the press event.
Yeah, and it's almost to me like I'm curious if they knew that this game wasn't going to hit that day when they did that press release. But I think that they might have already planned. They had booths already. They had already space rented for it, but they couldn't back out.
I don't know. I think that they could have done that's a good question. I think that if you really look at it, I think there's a way for them to have still done the event if they did know that they couldn't hit the date, to still hold the event and say all the stuff and just say the game is coming, we'll have a release date soon, very soon, and still back out of it, at least showing the date. But one thing, I don't know if you read the Neil Druckmann Naughty Dog post on the PlayStation blog, when it was finally official that it was, it was rumored a day before. And I remember thinking that, man, this is a really weird rumor, and I was a little hesitant to believe it because I was like, why would Sony, who have famously refrained from putting dates on things because they're so afraid of, I'm not going to say afraid, they're so cautious of not wanting to delay games because of the negative PR that it can incur. So they're very, very meticulous about it. They don't want to. They don't want to announce a date until the game is essentially in its final stretch. That's what they do. So of course they went to Naughty Dog, and Naughty Dog would have ostensibly given them this date, and that's why Sony went with it and said, "Okay, now is the time for the event. We know that we're within 3 to 4 months of release. We're going to have essentially that's what they've seemed to do. Put a date on it about a quarter before it releases. Yeah, that way you have time to market and do everything that you need to do. So." In this case, what he said is that when they originally gave the date, they thought they had it, and then as they continued into this last little polishing phase of this last quarter before the game goes gold, 2 to 3 month little period, that some of the areas that they thought they had correctly calculated, as they started hitting them, they realized that they needed more time to polish them to Naughty Dog level. So it was either to let them be in the game at a lesser level, which Naughty Dog doesn't want to do, or to completely remove some things from the game in order to not have something of lesser quality. And they said neither of those things were the things they wanted to do. So the third and final option, and the one that they ultimately went with, is asking for more time. Right. And I agree with you. I don't think that a delay is a bad thing by any standard. I do think that it is quite weird, like you say, to come out with so much confidence and say, this is our date. Yeah.
And the other thing is that I only get frustrated with games. Like, let's say Death Stranding. We knew that technically I am a little frustrated with Last of Us, but due to the nature of the game, I give it a little bit more leeway. But it's like Kingdom Hearts 3, Final Fantasy 15, Death Stranding, Days Gone. These games that we've known about for the past 5 years, and we've had trailer after trailer after trailer for, and then we finally get a release date, and then only 6 months to a year later, it's like, oh well, that release date's pushed back now.
Yeah,
it's
and
like,
that did happen with both all those games.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's why I listed all those games, and that's kind of with this one is that I'm frustrated. Luckily, it's only a 3-month period, but now I'm curious because this puts us at a little over a year that again, like an exclusive has been launched on this system for PlayStation 4 to this degree, except Death Stranding.
Oh, do you mean
from Days Gone to Last of Us 2
was delayed?
You have one game that's Death Stranding, which is 6 months after Days Gone release came. Or wait, Days Gone came out March.
Days Gone came out in April.
April? Okay.
Yeah.
Then that makes sense then. 7 months. But yeah, like so for that entirety of
April 26th.
Actually, yeah. What did it get delayed to? April
26th
May
is when
22nd?
it came out, and that one came. Yeah, that one got
May
moved
29th.
to May 29th.
So a year and a month later there's one exclusive that's on that same level
with
of
Ghost of
degree.
Tsushima reportedly. Again, we don't know for sure, but reportedly pushed back from its original internal projected date of first half of 2020.
Well, I always heard it was this year was their projected date, and then the rumored date would have been March.
Maybe. I don't know, but I'll say this. I understand that pushing The Last of Us back does necessitate the need for it. Let's say that The Last of Us was going to be February, and then Ghost of Tsushima was going to be May, 3 months apart, essentially, or whatever you want to say. I think that makes sense. But I think the moment that you take The Last of Us, the game that was going to come first, and push it back, you almost have to push Ghost of Tsushima back. Now, what that actually ends up meaning and what it does, but what it ends up meaning for that game, who knows? I mean, whether it was already planned for that time or not, who knows? And it may just be that they push it another 3 months back. If it was going to come out in May, maybe now we see it in August or July or somewhere in that area.
But that's to me a superficial delay because you're only delaying it for that sole reason of, hey, this game's not going to sell well now because of this other game coming out next to it.
It's what we always said about Titanfall and Battlefield 4 or Battlefield 1, I should say. Yeah, it's Battlefield 1 and Titanfall 2. There's no need to cannibalize your own games considering how many dates you have.
Right, but I don't think either one of those games were delayed. So to delay a game into the
zone, they weren't. They weren't.
To delay a game into the time zone of another big release, to force yourself to delay that game for sales, it's redundant and it's tiring.
Well, what do you mean redundant? Because I do think that if you're going to have affected sales by that, why? They weren't initially going to cannibalize each other, whereas from all the dates that we had, Titanfall 2 and Battlefield 1 were always going to be right there. Now, I get what you mean. But
we also
one
don't know the real date of Ghost. This is purely speculating that Ghost is going to hit May.
But if it was going to hit May, and this gets pushed into it, I get it. Even 2 weeks between those. I mean, do you remember when they announced when there was rumors of The Last of Us coming in February and late February? Which it did end up being.
Yeah.
I said, man, I don't know, because that is a week or 2 weeks maybe. I think it was a week, actually, essentially, because February's short. Yeah, so I think it was a week before Final Fantasy VII. And while it's not a Sony-published game, it is a PS4 exclusive, be it timed or not, and it's being marketed heavily towards PlayStation. Why would you try and have those two compete with each other? Now, the one saving grace of that is that they are vastly different genres.
They are, yeah.
But
and they're like, and you know,
I still think that when you're in that situation, even if it's a timed exclusive that's from a different publisher, I think it's smart to try and keep those apart from each other.
I would say
maximum. If they would have said that The Last of Us 2 was like early February, like Valentine's Day or before, I'd have been like, okay, there's at least 2 to 3 weeks between these two games, and The Last of Us will take most people probably 2 to 3 weeks.
What other game was coming out around that time? Because we talked about like, oh well, it's not.
Cyberpunk is another big game.
Yeah, okay, that's what it was. Because we were like, it's not going to take us super long to be Last of Us to give us enough time to play Cyberpunk or launch too.
Yeah, and I think Cyberpunk is a week after Final Fantasy, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm not, and that's that. You know, you can look at the delay as like good. The bugs are getting out, but now you can look at the delay as good. There's only 2 games in the first quarter of 2019 I have to really worry about, because coming up soon I have 2 games in the next 3 weeks that I have to worry about. Yet one of them is only Sony's because that one's Sword and Shield.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Sword and Shield hits the same day as Death Stranding, correct?
1 week apart.
1 week apart.
I'm pretty sure.
Gotcha.
I'm pretty sure that Death Stranding comes out a week later than Sword and Shield.
Well, Death Stranding is November 9th, if I'm remembering correctly.
Okay, then I think it's Pokemon Sword and Shield come out a week later after that then.
Yeah. So,
yeah, November 15th, so 6 days.
So November 8th would be Death Stranding because it's a Friday release. Anyway, so for that, I mean, and maybe I just missed it because we got off on a little bit of not a tangent. I'd say it's still very in line with the conversation. But I know your original point was to show that games like Final Fantasy, Final Fantasy 15 and even Kingdom Hearts, I actually even agree with that. That game got delayed and then still, I think, had things that should have been in it, like the actual extra hard mode that was already seen as in parts of the game.
Was it Proud?
Yeah, well, it wasn't, because Proud's already there. I think it was Nightmare mode or whatever. It's called.
I thought it was like Proud Plus or Critical Plus, but no.
Whatever. Maybe it's Critical mode. I can't remember the names of the difficulties. Proud's the one that's always
and
been in the game.
Liam said in Discord the other day about how some people like disliked. He was kind of playing with us about Kingdom Hearts 3. It's like we don't hate Kingdom Hearts 3. We liked it. It's just it wasn't as good as we thought it was going to be.
And I think that and actually I end up saying the same thing for Final Fantasy 15 on my part, though I know that you feel differently of Final Fantasy 15.
Oh, yeah.
But I think the clear thing that we can both agree on is that Final Fantasy 15 would have been that much better received if it just would have. If you're already going to push the date back, just push it back a little bit more. And I know that there's a big cost incurred with that. It's hard on, if you're not aware of how the gaming business goes, part of why these games end up releasing anyway is they push them back as far as they can from a fiscal quarter standpoint. Because essentially what happens is eventually if you don't get them out in a certain fiscal year or by a fiscal quarter, it shows a drop on returns from costs that you had to make to develop it. You're not going to sell anything to divert that cost. Investors start to look at it and go, when is this coming? We got to do something. And I think that's why you look at something like Anthem, and Anthem, despite all the problems it had at launch, essentially had to launch because it had been delayed more than a year of the original intention of the date that they had set. So whether or not we got that date, we didn't hear that it was coming in that year. We didn't have an exact date to go off of that it got pushed back up by a year. But what happens is that on the inside of things, the people who are paying for that game and everything is looking at it going, this is a year more cost now that we have to be able to make back on this game when it comes.
Yeah.
And that investors are worried about, we've got to put this game out. We can't do any more time. We don't have the funds to put any more money in this game that we're unsure of how it's going to sell, because you never know how well a game's going to sell. Thankfully for Anthem, it was in the top selling games of the year up until September. But I get it. Yeah. So yeah, Fallout 76 seems like another example of a game that
should have been
a delay would have helped
a full year at
least.
And
maybe a delay would have got us to a point where these things were handled in a.
Well, it's almost like I'm curious if they even care.
Perceived in a different way. You know what I mean? Like, I think that something like this, like honestly, if the game would have launched with the subscription service, but in a better state across the board, no bugs or less bugs. Again, less bugs, more fun stuff going on. A lot of the things that they've added in updates in this first year. Though the one thing that I guess we're kind of avoiding with a game like The Last of Us 2, and I think that you may have meant this when you said earlier, you said due to the type of game it is. I don't necessarily know what you meant by that when you were talking about it in response to games like Days Gone and Death Stranding being delayed. But you said you understand a bit more on The Last of Us. But where I'm going with that is that The Last of Us 2 is a linear game with no multiplayer, as we are learning right now. So when you're dealing with that, it's a game that already knows what it's going to be and doesn't intend to update and change massively. Whereas a game like Anthem, Destiny, The Division 2, Fallout 76, games as a service, they live and die on the fact that when you're playing them, and when you get people playing them and you put them out there and let people play them, you're going to get feedback that is invaluable. And it's going to be feedback that is going to shape the game to be better, because it's feedback that when you're trying to get feedback for a live game from only small test groups, you're not getting enough.
Right.
The moment you put the game out to more hands and can get more feedback, the thing that Fallout 76 probably would have suffered from anyway, even with a year later, is that throughout that year, they would have had to have multiple beta tests or something to say, we've got to understand what you as a community want from this style of game, because we already know it's so different than Fallout that you expected.
Right.
So with that, we want to make this the best game we can coming out. So we need you guys to work with us and give us feedback on what we have so far, even if it's just small sections of whatever. It's like, hey, on the very basic level of things, what are things you'd like to see that added or changed or balanced or whatever? And I think that is part of what makes games as a service that much harder to judge when they're coming out. And I think that's why Destiny 2 had a weird launch for plenty of people. While The Division 2 had a weird launch for plenty of people, Anthem had a weird launch for everybody, essentially, and Fallout 76, again, had a weird launch for everybody. The game wasn't what they wanted it to be until later.
Well, and what I meant by The Last of Us 2 is the perceived budget.
Oh, yeah.
So that we know that the budget, the mocap, all that stuff's going to look fantastic. I want it to look fantastic. Like, I know that I want it to perform and work fantastic.
Yeah. So if delaying it is to make sure that you are consistent across the board, because I'll say that, man, if you play some of these games, when they look great in one area, and then suddenly in the next, it's like, oh, that's inconsistent.
There's a little bit of that in Call of Duty Modern Warfare, where the cutscenes for the game are CGI and like they're done really, really well, but then they cut to in-game cutscenes or in the in-game models, and it's like it's a little staggering, but it doesn't look terrible.
It's only weird in a time where nobody really does pre-rendered cutscenes anymore.
I don't really know if this is, I think they're mocapped.
Well, yeah, but even, I mean, you know, like God of War was all mocapped, but they weren't pre-rendered, and of course they couldn't be because they were single cut camera.
They look really good, and the cutscenes in the game look really good too, like the normal ones. But there's a difference.
Yeah,
and you'll have one cutscene in the rendered, and then you'll have another cutscene in game. They follow right after each other almost always. So it's like, well, this is it's staggering.
And see, that goes into it's funny I brought up God of War for PlayStation 4, but you know, all the other God of Wars were a bounce between that. It was always in-engine cutscenes. But then for the biggest things, they always wanted to show you, okay, here's a pre-rendered cutscene because we want this to look dope, and we can't do that with the technology we have. But I think everybody's landing on the fact that in-engine cutscenes work now. Yeah, the engines and on those types of games look. Yeah, they're good enough to just let you do it in real time. So I find that to be a very odd way to. Which I mean, Call of Duty's always done it to an extent, but I was hoping that they'd move away from it with this engine change. You know, because Infinity War, a game I loved, had pre-rendered cutscenes, but it also had plenty of in-engine cutscenes, and while it was a little staggering, you got over it. But now that you have a new engine, why not just show that engine off in cutscenes?
It almost feels like a TV show, the way this story is. Like, it feels like a military TV show. It's kind of cool.
Weird. Okay. Well, anyway, is there any other games or any other thing that you want to think about with in relation to these two things? Or are we going to close this thing off?
I guess we can close it out. Yeah. What do you want the community's take to be for next week?
Let's see. I want to say...
Actually, why don't we just keep it simple and straight? How do you feel about delays?
There we go. Easy.
Yeah. That way...
I like that one too.
Yeah. That way, because it could be one-dimensional for pretty much anybody. How do you feel about delays? Do they bother you, or do you not care, or are you sensible about it, or do they pitch it off?
Yeah, are you the Nintendo thing that's been going around, and I can't remember which Nintendo exec it is, or developer, but saying, you know, a delayed game is eventually good, a broken game is always bad, or a bad game is always bad.
Yeah.
And I do think that there's something to be said about that. The only time that I don't know if that's true is live service games. So
well, I think that
it's weird.
There's a good way to say it too, is that a launched broken game is almost always dead.
Oh, it's almost always going to end up in that. It's very rare that a game bounces back from that.
Rainbow Fallout 76 still has not.
Yeah, Rainbow Six Siege is one of the few games that I think really has that story.
I don't think Rainbow Six Siege launched badly, did it?
It launched
mediocre, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then it took a lot of updates to where suddenly they breathed new life into it and it blew up, and it was like, oh. Okay.
Gotcha.
So it's a weird parable, but we're interested in to hear your thoughts on that. I think that's a great community stake questions. Thank you, Saul. But we're going to wrap this episode up and get to moving along. Thank you, guys. We appreciate your time every week. We love the guys we love you that listen to us and interact with us. It's one of the best parts of my week. And now that Saul's a happy camper at his new job, I think he's a little bit more, he's able to enjoy it a little bit more, which is good. So we'll see you guys next week. Hope you have a good Halloween coming Thursday. Please send in your costumes. I want to see them. I want to laugh. I want to think, oh, that's badass and cool.
Definitely don't send lewds.
Kiki. Again, I'm kidding. I'm not. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks to our patrons, Dan Barber, Josh Jarrell, Matthew Green, my name is Dan, Douglas Blow, Sean Santarud, Eric McAllister, Matt Sycamore, Funk Turkey, Shadowist, Steven Salazar, The Stonard, Travis Blow, Eduardo Palomino, Stefan Swanlin, Coy Live, Philip LaGuerre, Corey Hickerson, Brian, Donovan Williams, William Digital Spooker, Derek Porter, Josh Ayers, Brandon Edwards, Sean One Neo, Tyler Powers, and Dylan Kirby. If you would like to get some of our content early, exclusive posts sometimes, and the chance to get custom cases that we designed for you to choose, consider going over and to our Patreon at patreon.com/Nartech and giving as little as $1 per month. Thank you so much.